So again, part two. Why is this? Yeah, it'd be handy if I turned it on. So again, we talked about this reflective practice, and it tells about we look at our past experiences, and we go through assessment of that, and where do we want to go next. I mean, that's the whole point about it is getting the learning from experience essentially, and then using that, but being consciously aware of what we've done and how we did it, and critically aware of it, such that we can really fine tune it for future references or future situations. And then again, another definition. This is Jenny Moon again coming back in 1999. Um, it was either this or write the song for Prince. Jeez. Anyway, it was a set of abilities and skills to indicate the taking of a critical stance and orientation to problem solving or state of mind. Blah, straightforward. We've gone all through this. And last week as well, I went through Kolb cycles. So, this is just a very simple version of it, but still essentially the learning theory and our cycle. And when we use that in connection with our reflective practice, really, it becomes extremely powerful in helping us create, as you're always going to be creating these metacognitions, essentially possibilities or scenarios that you could use in a future state. And it's how quickly you can make the connection to whichever one of these metacognitions you have in your repertoire in a particular stage. So we do actually absorb quite a lot of the current situation or an impending situation, and we start to draw inferences. Basically, we're using our intuition or gut feeling, and then we're thinking back on we're searching for similarities or metacognitions. I remember coming through this problem before, and this is how I dealt with it previously. That's so when you're putting in this, that's the concrete experience past. Now we're elevating that into a temporary state. It's a flux until we get over this impending instance or situation that we want to try and resolve. Okay, so it's metacognition, in other words. So why do we reflect? And we've covered this, and so many times. And it reflects learners to understand what they already know at an individual level. So it's deepening the knowledge. That's why I was introducing you to the likes of the Secchi model. It's this whole idea of the internalization and the sense making of stuff around you. Whether it's a complex mathematical formula, a chemical equation, um, the instruction kit from IKEA. The bottom line is we still have to try and make sense of all this stuff, and from and probably much not as I might be joking about IKEA. There's nothing wrong with IKEA. I'll have you know. Anyway, apart from that, if you well, us fellas now we kind of we behave differently when we get instruction manuals and all that sort of stuff, and we just tear straight into stuff, and always bits left over or something goes wrong, fairly typically. And then that's why we've coined the phrase or the acronym RTFM, and you know what that stands for. Because on reflection, if you do it in a nice methodical way, take your time to plan it, count out all the nuts and bolts and the bits of dowels and whatever else you have, put them all out on the table, on the floor, whatever, and do a dry run, and then blah blah. And you say, oh, jeez, that's an awful waste of time. It actually saves time, strangely enough. But it's a very simple example, and it's precisely what we do in all these other complex type situations. I'm not saying that IKEA isn't complex. It can be if you want to make it so. And then we identify what they need to know in order to advance understanding. So what don't we know? What are we missing? So we begin to realize that there are missing pieces to the jigsaw, and we try to fill them in. We try to conceptualize what these pieces might look like, and then we start hunting around the board, looking on the table, looking for these bits and pieces. In other words, mentally, we're conjuring up all these possibilities, and then we make sense of the new information and feedback in the context of their own experience. So that's where it becomes relational. So when we test the concept, when we get feedback, it either works or it doesn't. That's the simple binary approach but it's essentially it works for everything comes down to simply on or off, ones and zeros, yes and no, and so on. Everything comes down to that fundamental level. And the whole point about it is that we don't want grayness. in our decisions. We, as insofar as is possible, we like to have the confidence and I say it's either that or that, binary, yes or no. And we try to, and this is why we go through all this, making sense of stuff and looking for additional information, such that we can remove or slim down the gray area in our decisions. That's the questionable part. That's why we reflect. We may already have a predisposition. Again, these are our biases kicking in towards a yes or no type answer as such, but we have to let the data filter through, and that's a kind of an important point. Some people have been asking about possibly taking this to a next level, this program, for example, and going on to do an MBA. Now, you have two options there, or a master's in any shape or form. It doesn't necessarily have to be an MBA, but we have two of them in the college. While we're on this subject matter, we have two running in the college. There's one that Adult Ed runs, which is another year on top of. They have this executive management thing, higher diploma going, which isn't 1,000 miles dissimilar from this module from recollection, but they say you do a second year. In any case, we also have our executive MBA program, which is Friday evenings and the occasional Saturday, not too many of them, Friday afternoons and Friday nights. Usually come in at 2 o'clock, you're out the door by 8:30, 9 o'clock, absolute latest, but usually 8:30ish. Point I'm making is that in that you have research methodology, and no matter what other subjects you go on to do, you will have to do some element of research, and that's where this stuff also will benefit you, because you have to let the data develop the hypothesis. You can't try and, well, you can cheat and try to coerce or change or manipulate, data to give you a favorable picture. Yeah, we've been having it for the last week on CNN, for heaven's sake. Anyway, but you can manipulate, but the truest form of research methodology, any of the methodologies that you use in research, is that you gather the data. Now you'll state an hypothesis. We will investigate the impacts of Brexit or COVID-19 on long distance supply chain management, for example. Pretty topical at the moment. It's in a bloody mess, to say the least. But we kind of think, yeah, this is throwing a mess into everything, and so on and so forth. But when we start to investigate and we pull all the data together, we might find there's something totally different. It might be people are exploiting the fact that this is that COVID is causing havoc with supply chain and so on and so forth, and it might not be true. So, for example, people would have assumed, to say about assume, make an ass out of you and me, but they would have assumed that Dell went to Poland because of the cheap labor. Absolutely wasn't the case at all. I think I mentioned that it was 7th on the list of priorities. But when you start to analyze the data and look at the numbers and so on, it begins to, the truth becomes to emerge. And that's what hypothesis testing is, trying to find a higher degree of certainty about something. And that's why when we do this reflection, it helps us to stand back from what we're actually doing and remove as much as, or insofar as is possible, our biases and others' biases. And that can become quite tricky, because you'll have things, group think and all that sort of stuff. So this concept of the non-ego biases, in other words, other people's biases influencing your data and so on. So this is where when we're looking at this relation, you have to start clearing away all that fuzziness, such that you're able to make an informed decision for yourself in relation to the particular situation or context that you're working in. And that's where it says here, it guides further learning, choices or development as such. So what do you need to learn? What areas do you feel you're weak in, and and probably the important point in this is that you are absolutely honest with yourself when you are assessing shortcomings or weaknesses in these areas. That, I really don't know this stuff, and I think I know that, but I need to be reassured, or I need to find out, do I know it? Test, test, test. That's the only way you're going to find out. And not just talking about academic stuff here, and talking about generally inside and work as well. And how do you find out? Oftentimes you'll have to ask, or interweb it, Google it, whatever, research it, to find out for yourself. And that's predicated by your particular learning style. Do you need to sit down and look at YouTube videos, for example, or and God knows there's any subject under the sun you'll find out about there, or do you want to specialize? And so and don't let the snobbery run away with you. What I mean by that is, some people say, it's in the British Medical Journal, so it has to be good, as opposed to the Clare Clinical newspaper. I'm not slagging off anyone from Clare, by the way, but because it's a reputational type document as such, so that kind of stuff doesn't particularly matter. Don't be influenced or biased by perceptions of material. You can research. Sometimes Wikipedia can be quite informative. But as I said, as long as you validate what you're looking at. And then we say reflection helps the learner to understand what they already know, and so on. And that goes down. Why is this looping around there? That's fine. So personal reflections, we mentioned this previously again. You need to have priorities. You use your time. What motivates you. It isn't always very positive that we want to go off and start studying stuff, and sometimes we get great excitement out of it. It's by virtue of the fact that you're learning something new. And one of my own justifications is, I learn this stuff. I may not like it all the time, but I know that learning doesn't go to waste. And that's the important thing, no matter what it is. And oftentimes I will fall into that, my own trap, and I start looking at stuff on the interweb and say, oh geez, that's interesting, and I might never use that, but I don't know that. If it's anyway kind of linked to what I'm looking at, I might say that becomes a benefit to me in sometime down the road. So I keep it. I hoard it. That's why we learn. That's why we look at stuff. We don't know. We can't always have the how to say the benefit or the opportunities to have just in time learning. It would be great. It will come to a stage when we can do that, but well, we're pretty much there at the moment, in terms of certain types of stuff we can pick up literally at the press of a button. But in any case, having the right motivation to want to learn, as I said, on the negative and of course on the positive side, because you particularly like the subject. You might want to learn how to play the guitar. You're motivated. Why? Because you want to play in a rock group or something like that. Best advert I saw today. Jesus. Oh God. Some fellas for Christmas, he's offering to sell air guitars. Anyway, Jesus, yeah. The old jokes are the best. So then we have to look at, as I said, the direction we want to take ourselves in our own professional development. Now, interestingly, how do you know? Now, this is where it gets into kind of the outer limits type thinking. What direction do you want to go? Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? Not here if I have any choice in matter, but the usual things. But you actually don't know. Oftentimes we learn stuff and it kind of hangs there, and we say, well, okay, I've learned all about this marketing stuff, but I'm working in finance or I'm working in HR. Will I ever really get to use this for marketing stuff? And you'd be surprised that there are times might come up and say, you might be having a good cross-function team. You might be invited to take part in the organizational strategy development and so on and so forth. And then we begin to say, oh geez, I remember learning that stuff in the marketing module of some course that you would have done, and now I see how this kind of integrates in. So it finally makes that little bit of sense to you why you learned it, because you're now seeing it in action. So it's yeah, but as I said, in terms of our reflections, we're creating multiple the multiverse, isn't that what called it inside in that Bruce Willis movie? I can't think of the name of it again. But anyway, you have multiverses. In other words, multiple possibilities of the future. You don't know exactly which way it's going. Of course, it helps us then again to identify our own strengths and weaknesses in terms of what we don't already know and how we can expedite our opportunities, our and best use of time to fill in the blanks and find out what we don't know and become more efficient on it. And then of course identifying problems. Really, what this is bringing you out, and you say, well, how do we start to look and identify problems through reflective personal reflection? Well, it enables us to stand back and think critically. So we're beginning to look at situations, and we can see potential pitfalls in a particular situation from our own personal observations and reflections, so on and so forth. So it's that kind of devil advocacy coming out in you, self-critiquing and so on. So we can actually use that to say, right, this was the course of action, but here's a potential problem or a speed bump on this if we take this particular action as such. And of course, we develop our action plan of the most preferred and down to the least preferred options. And that's what I was saying all from the start of all of this. You're looking at the developing a range of possibilities. And this is what your action plan. So you narrow it down. Now, of course, you don't want to overwhelm yourself with too many actions in such an action plan, because then it can become extremely confusing. And that's why I say, for example, when you are doing these business models, such as your SWOT analysis, that you really only look at maybe 3, 4, 5 maximum in each box, because beyond that you're just filling up space and it's in the boxes and coming up with stuff that really are going to distract you. But more importantly, if you restrict it to maybe 4 or 5 bullet points in each of the 4 boxes: strengths, weakness, opportunities, threats, then it makes it easier to prioritize. But as I always say, there's a precursor to those points. As quickly as possible, identify those that are actionable. I mean, you could put down all sorts of weird and wonderful ideas into a SWOT, but are they really doable? Most often, not really. It's a strength, the senior management team; weakness, senior management team. You see, yeah, but what can you do? Fire the whole freaking lot of them. Yeah, the thought is appealing, all right, but it's not realistic. So again, it's not actionable. The point is, that's when we look at those. So it involves, talk about slowing down. Eventually got across the screen. Are there more of these? Oh, I thought I turned off this bloody animation. So you need to slow down, of course. Don't rush into things. Take a nice handy pace. And we talked about this. Pause, examine, analyze, inquire about complexities of life or targeted professional development. And that's the latter part is the point that we're looking at. Inquire, what is what are we trying to achieve in terms of our professional development? So what are what kind of impacts can there, what influences our particular development? And despite all of the models and so on, there's always going to be an element of luck. Okay, now, and we'll come back on that one. So active choice to pause and examine the not passive process. Remember, we talked about the active and passive process model there about 3 weeks ago. And so we'd prefer to be far more in the active process. So doing something about our choices and not sitting back and hoping and praying and wishing that something falls in our lap as such. In other words, you've got to make it work. Okay? And then the cognitive developing, and these are the levels that we're evaluating at. Didn't put that other document up either. Freaking hell, Mark! For heaven's sake, what? You want to wake up? Do you know that? This is all I'm recording. The cognitive process. I mentioned to you about the marking criteria and so on. Just let me check. Did I put it up there? So as I don't be beating myself up all the time. Everyone else does. Jeez, I did.
I think, Mark, it's down the bottom.
You did indeed, yeah. It's actually it's it might be in a couple of places actually. Art of Audit. I don't know if you're in Moodle at the moment. I just spotted something that where are you? Online presentations. Oh, I can't do it that way. I can't. It's on Moodle, but it's under a section that I have blocked off. I think I can move it down here. Just bear with me 1 second. If I don't get on top of these things now, bring it down here underneath. Put it just above, and there it is now. Show to students. It's in the section where I have the assignment details. Or just underneath that is the this thing called detailed marking scheme. So it's pretty comprehensive and it deals precisely with this whole area of analysis, synthesis, and evaluation, and at this particular level in your academic development. These are the kind of how to say the taxonomy words that you use to enable you to think about stuff and present a cogent argument or a point using these concepts of analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. So then many different forms of functions and many ways to reflect. And as I said, yeah, it could be, the tools you use, do you walk, do you cycle, do you, I knew I'd get it in, yay. Dear God. So yeah, whatever method you want to use to reflect itself. And then it's a state of mind. That's a interesting one. So our learning styles show preferences. Not everyone is as reflective. Some are more action oriented. We've covered that several times. And reflection can be encouraged by structuring in time schedule, using journal diaries. Our realistic assessment gives strength. So yeah, do you set aside a particular time, or do you work rigidly to a timetable to do this? I honestly, some would say yes, structure this and be absolutely methodical about it. But again, it'll depend on, as it says here, your learning styles. You might find that you need to allocate, we say maybe 2 or 3 hours if you were doing it, or you could do it in a half an hour. It really depends. If I'm reflecting, I'm thinking of stuff, and then I'd like to get home, or if I'm not in a suitable environment, and take notes and draw some pictures, and that's just my kind of way of doing it. I like to use mind maps, most definitely. Tony Buzan's technique of mind maps, not the software. Oh Jesus, stay away from that freaking software and mind maps. No, it's just horrendous stuff. It's your own personal style of note taking for all intents and purposes, using mind maps. But in any case, structuring in time schedule, I'm a little bit more lenient than that, because I like to let it flow kind of a little bit more naturally. So, I might choose to listen to music when I'm driving down to Athlone in the car, or I might just turn it way down and listen to a different type of music, and something that might be a little bit more soothing and relaxing while I'm driving, at the same time allows my mind to wander a little bit, which is essentially structuring a reflective approach. Might be one way of doing it. Or if for example, you could tangentially restructure it. If, for example, right now in this middle of this stupid COVID yoke, you might decide that you're going for a walk in the evenings for an hour or so, and certainly on your own. You wouldn't be doing this with somebody else. But if you're doing it for going for a walk, you can say, well, that's my structure. I'm doing it every second evening or third evening or whatever it is, just to give yourself time to let your mind do some thinking and reflecting. So experiential learning theory, it's not enough just to do it, neither is it enough to just think about it. So we need to stand back. So learning from experience must involve links between the doing and the thinking. So we need to be able to stand back and see how we did what we did, and what did we think or what did we feel about what we just did, which kind of brings us again. You'll see this coming up again and again. The synopsized version of this module, and it's which basically says, what did I do previously and how can I improve on the way I did what I did previously. So it's that standing back and looking at what you've done and how you achieved it. So how to become a reflective learner? Well, you need to set some kind of objectives. What do you think you need to know? What are you uncomfortable with? Now, being uncomfortable with something is, again, it's just another comfort. It's another concept. So we'll all have different levels of discomfort in terms of what we know and don't know. But nevertheless, we will be aware enough that we need more information or we need more data. It'll be one or the other to enable us to be able to piece together and have this, as I say, that eureka moment of saying, now it makes sense to me. But you need to have that's what reflection means for us to be able to piece together the way we did it, the way we pieced all the missing elements, the missing parts of the jigsaw, how we put these together. That's what reflective practice enables you to do. Recognize the current level of your own performance, how you're doing, what you're doing, and again, the one of the prerequisites to being effective in your reflective practice is you really have to be honest with yourself, and never, as I said, never assume that you know stuff. You really need to be thoroughly sure of what you know and don't know, and digging out stuff, into going to the nth degree to find out stuff, and looking at it from so many different perspectives might take time. But so what? And point in case, this weekend I was doing some work on these, and I was getting material from two of my colleagues, and some of it was video material, and I had to deconstruct the videos and reconstruct them in a different form. And they were, of course, they were Zoom videos, and they were horse's ass. Bottom line is, I started on Saturday afternoon on one set, about 2:30, I think it was, by the time I actually came up here to do it. And I worked through it and worked through it, and I was thinking, how can I solve this problem? It was I was actually in the nuts and bolts of exactly what we've been learning for the last number of weeks, again and again, so many times in the space of 12 plus hours, and taking a break around 7 o'clock to have a bite to eat and so on and so forth. But the bottom line was, I kept, there was various sorts of challenges, and I said, I remember seeing something like this before, and but this is not the same, and how can I come up and coming up with some I like to think clever solutions or fixes to get me out of tight spots. That was, and then one of the colleagues said, "Oh, did you not get my other video file on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock?" Was I ready to freaking commit murder? Oh Jesus, you dipstick, sending me this stuff now, and at this, after doing all this work, so exactly this type of thing. I went back over and said, right, what did I do? What did I do? And how can I change this? Because now time is against me, because I had to repeat the whole thing again. So for another group, so not students, but another pair of colleagues that wanted something different on. So when I'd gotten through, I remember, I did this and I did that. I can do this more efficiently. So I was literally, absolutely practicing what I've been preaching for the last 6 weeks, and doing for the last number of years anyway. But I sat back and said, and I could, even though it was after, well, the first one on Saturday morning at 2:30, sorry, Saturday afternoon, I finished at about, it was about 3:25 on Sunday morning. And then I got up, and it was at 10 o'clock, and then spotted these emails coming in, and said blah blah blah, and I said, oh geez, I'm going to have to go into this. So I literally had to pick myself off the ground and say, right, geez, I better get stuck into this again. Where do I begin, and blah blah blah. So went at it again, and by about 11 o'clock last night, I had the new material how to say, restitched into the version that I put together. Okay, and sent that off, and happy days. Sent it up to YouTube and got the quality right. Everything was happy, and then I said, right, 11 o'clock. Will I leave it until Monday or not? I went straight at it at 11:30 last night with the second batch, and I finished that at it was 20 to 4 this morning, and up again at 8:30. But that was fine, no big deal. Where are the violins? Where's the orchestra? Anyway, the bottom line was, but it was I was doing it in less than half the time, and even though there was more material to have to manage in this on the second formal group, but it was exactly that, you know. So I was setting targets. I said I needed to have this done, and but even though I went to bed at 20 to 4, give or take, and up again. Yeah, did I say that twice? That I up again at half 8ish, kind of 8:45 for me. Um, I actually I felt great all day. I'm beginning to it's beginning to kick in now. Probably tomorrow now, when the batteries will totally go. But the point I'm making is that you know, even the emotion of what I'd learned in the space of we say 48 hours more or less, the ways I learned what I had learned, how I was quickly chopping and changing stuff around, and how I was coming up with alternative solutions to some of the problems, such that now the next time round I probably will be able to do it in less than 3 hours, you know, that kind of thing. So it was and but will I do it again? Sorry, I didn't say that, did I? Of course I will, yeah. Uh, yeah, I wouldn't blame. Okay. Yeah, got me. Deserve that one. Jeez, it's or can I respond to that? I'm not sure. Let me see. Can I? Um, uh, this probably won't. No, because I haven't it set on your don't do it. Don't have it set. Um, no, we'll add it in for the hell of it. I can do this while I'm talking to you. Add in scene and existing scenes, and I pull in this one, and I go okay, and then I should be able to tell you this or do this.
Brilliant! I have absolutely no idea what's going on.
That's exactly how I feel most of the time, and so on. I know I'll have to. I'm demented. Um, this is without a shadow of a doubt. This will solve all your reflective problems and reflective action problems.
To alcohol, the cause of and solution to all of life's problems.
Yeah, you see. Anyway, where was I going with all that distraction? Anyway, I'll get this working. I found a solution. Ah, Jesus. So anyway, plan to meet the targets. What else is there on this? So yeah, that was the example of what we did at the weekend to practice what we preach. Otherwise, we'd never get anything done. I'd still be at it. Effective time management. The more cynical amongst you could say, for Jesus' sake, Mark, 4 o'clock in the morning, half 3, and anyway, that wasn't very effective time management. But in the bigger picture of things, probably was, because it meant that I got the crap out of my way. It's done and dusted now, and at least, But so we kept going to get the job done. It's I don't know if you've ever experienced stuff like that, but in previous careers, we would have pulled the ghosters, worked around the clock because you got so engrossed in trying to solve problems and so on, where you literally time flies and so on and that. But there is when you come out the far end, it does feel, you do have a sense of achievement, and use feedback and support. In the context of what I did, I sent it on and I said, right, are you happy enough with that, and so on and so forth. And they said, yes, great stuff, and blah 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 blah. Yeah, happy days, So now don't ask me again. and then monitor and review progress. So, and that's what I did this afternoon. Then, in this case, I sat back and I looked at and I looked through my files on my disks and so on. Said, well, this is how I will structure this moving forward, and put some of these processes in place to make. So I've actually created a whole new folder saying this is how I do it more effectively the next time around, and so on. So it's what we used to use in project management. I told you before, it was this document called OFI, Opportunities for Improvement. So I have a little short list of things I'll do better the next time around for myself. It doesn't necessarily mean that. And a little bit selfish to say for myself, because I have it written in such a way that anyone else could pick it up, and if they can follow the instructions on it, they'll be fine. They'll be able to do it, which means that they don't have to be relying on me to do it for them. And then critically reflect on own learning, as I just described there. Stand back, look at it, and can you do it better? And the number of times that I, over the last couple of days, that I literally, turned around and said, "Jesus, Mark, you're some gobshite." That's my way of being critically reflective on myself. In other words, what are you thinking about? Could you not have done it differently, or and so on and so forth? But anyway, it registers with me. That's important. And then recognizing the domains of learning, and we mentioned this before. You have the knowledge base, and then you have the psychomotor based domain and skill base. So that's do it, and then the other one is the thinking side. And you just have, and then the active domain, attitude and feelings. So these can affect you. So let's have a quick look at these. Cognitive domain, it's the lowest level. You just recall basic data, and oftentimes it may not even make sense, or does it have, and this is part of the problem of the rote learning that you'd have for Leaving Cert, Junior Cert, and so on. You're literally just recalling stuff. Do you actually know it? Nah, not to be too harsh on the young kids, they probably have some idea of what's going on, and so on and so forth. But I mean, when you're teaching them, maths, and calculus and stuff like that, to put it in context, and probably one of the best subjects that ever emerged in my day in the Leaving Cert anyway was the applied physics. So we could actually, understand why a train in this direction and a fly inside the train, or what speed are they going, and all this sort of stuff. But practical application, and then of course, many years later on, you have the what's to call it, is it the applied leaving cert or something like that, or whatever they call it, stupid thing. But anyway, the same concept. So comprehension, then, when we look at this in the cognitive application, analysis, and synthesis, so at these levels, do we understand enough to be able to apply it, and so on, or are we just doing it robotically? That's in the concept. So the highest level is evaluation, critiques, and judgment about values of ideas. So that's the higher ordinate thinking of these basic rote learning type things. What's the sense or the purpose for knowing this stuff? How can I use this? And do I need all of this, or do I need more data to allow me to progress, and so on? That's when you're getting to these higher levels, and that's really where you begin to start thinking constructively. And then the relevance to career path. At last, we've been going through all this stuff for weeks now. I know I'm joking. There's more to it than just this. So employers look for self-reflective people with skills of analysis, interpersonal skills, self-development, critical reflection on performance. And hang on a second, I nearly gave away the gem there. But and you might say, is that it? Not really, because we do have a little bit more to do, and obviously 3 more sessions. But as you're moving up in your careers or in your chosen career paths in terms of professional development, it goes beyond this critical reflection on performance. For example, if you were doing a 360 performance appraisal and you're the recipient of you're being appraised, for example, do you know the way in these 360s they can ask you to evaluate yourself and against your chosen objectives. You know, you need to do this, and you've identified the previous 12 months that, yeah, I must improve on this, and this, and you sit back and, I mean, sometimes we can be quite cynical and say, yeah, no, I'm great. I did everything perfectly well. You know, what's wrong with me? I need my appraisal, give me my bonus kind of thing. But really, we know that that's not right. I mean, it's not realistic. And who you're cutting? Only yourself at the end of the day. And they won't give it to you anyway, a bonus. So when you sit back and say, well, yeah, well, I give myself a 7 out of 10 on that point. I give myself a 4 out of 10 on that one. And the other part of the 360 performance appraisal, the survey will show the aggregate of what other people think of you in under those headings as well, and so on, and they feed it back. And that's why I particularly like that system, because what you evaluate yourself on, being absolutely honest with yourself, and then what other people, and it's the real fun in that. And when I used to have them years ago, was how close or not was I to what the aggregate of other people, you know, peers, other managers, and so on and so forth in the organization. When you aggregate their feedback and see how close or not I was to their assessment of me, and yeah, it's and being absolutely honest with yourself, because you know, when people are answering these questions on as part of the feedback, it is anonymous, and you're not going to find out who's saying what about you, you know, because the more people you select, the wider the better the response. It's like these psychometric tests. The more people that have done them, the better the sample size. Same idea with the 360 performance appraisal. So when we're actually when we're really in tune with ourselves and being honest with ourselves, that can be reflected with through external observations, such as your manager, and likewise for you when you're negotiating with somebody in an appraisal situation. You know, how do you get how do you kind of enable people to be honest about themselves and critical without making it sound like I'm the boss and you're bullshit, Mark, you're over exaggerating here, and so on and so forth. You have to be able to manage that situation to make them feel comfortable that they're saying, yeah, well, okay, I don't agree, I not so much that we agree to differ, but yeah, I see your point, or that person sees your point, and they'll then rethink what they're saying and probably agree more with what your interpretation of the aggregate results are. Do you follow me where I'm going, or have I gone around Kolb's cycle about 15 times too many? No? Okay. So here, as I said to you, the famous last words. What did I do yesterday, and how can I improve on the way I did what I did yesterday? And those two questions, they're not so much questions, but they're challenges, self challenges. They are in essence the fundamentals and the all encompassing thinking behind reflective practice. In so far as that it provokes a lot more than just what did I do yesterday? Yeah, went for a cycle. No, I didn't actually. But anyway, that's it's questioning it to think, you know, what actions did I take? How did I take them? Why did I take them? And are there better ways that I could take them? And how was I feeling when I was doing those actions? And how would my feelings change in a future state? So in other words, how can I improve in the way I did what I did yesterday? So the way I did a particular job, how was I feeling at the time? And I remember, for example, the first time I was a bit anxious and challenged when I was doing the first iteration of the work. The second time was of doing by making the add-ons, because some lines were changed and so on and so forth. That became a little bit more frustration, but because I had done the first time, the drive and the motivation to make it even better outweighed the frustration of having to redo it. In other words, the rework. And God knows you will find yourself in your jobs, and someone asks you to do something, and there's a change in the spec, or a change in requirements, or the customer changed their mind, and so on, and you have to redo all or parts of the solution. And there's nothing more demotivating than having to ask an employee to redo stuff that they've already done. and so on. But anyway, so in that case, in yesterday's, so should say the third iteration, which was the second group's set of stuff, I was far more positive, even though I was getting tired. But the momentum and I should say, I won't say the adrenaline, but the motivation to want to finish it and try and do it better even than the first version and do it quicker. These are all the motivations. So now, as I said, there was quite a range of emotions attached from the start. The thoughts of even having to sit down and do it, and here's the real stinger: I freaking volunteered to do this. Jesus, sometimes I need to learn when to shut up, and not say I'll do that for you. Yeah. Oh Jesus. It's like inside in a meeting, keep your mouth shut. Never raise a pint because you'll end up getting the action point out of that freaking pint. So it's you probably some people are nodding because they know what I mean. um, so then setting the objectives, having the clear objectives, what you want to achieve, clearly defines targets and follows, and I'm not even going to insult your intelligence with that this thing, but it's part of the slide deck anyway. But the kind of the smart approach in so far as so it's action based and it's realistic and time bound. So the professional development plan itself, what is a PDP? So simple recording, and I'm flying through this now because we've touched on all of these before. Practical outcomes of the experience, personalized record of one's career or experiences. It's probably too well. It's too much to ask, and there's a bit more work involved in it to do something on that on a kind of a CV basis as part of an assessment. And really, I don't think that I had thought of using that kind of approach. Get your CVs and tell me, take your strength and points and relate that back to your lifeline, your professional lifeline, and a career path as such, and highs and lows and so on associated with that. And what other benefits. So in other words, if you got a promotion and at some stage, and maybe 5-10 years ago, you remember it well, and the positive feelings, but what else happened in your life in around the same time, and you probably would be able to start linking to things were going well left, right, and center. Got the promotion, this, that, and the other things started to go well as well. And other times when you didn't get that promotion, or you had to change job, for example, the feelings. So your emotions and the circumstances won't be isolated. They will be impacting other areas and so on. So that's why when I was talking last week, it's really hard to separate the professional and the personal person. It just doesn't happen. I mean, I'm not even going to look at the screen in case there are HR people on there. But this work-life balance bullshit, it just does not exist. In reality, you can separate out some parts of it, but in reality, you're still the same person, and you just need to be able to turn off a little bit and turn on to other parts. But fundamentally, you are the person that's experiencing the different situations, whether it's between 9 and 5 or between 6 and 8 the following morning, and so on and so forth. Our ways of doing things, the way we reflect, the way we approach problems doesn't actually change. The dynamics might be different, but the way we go about it doesn't really change, and we're continuously fine-tuning. I mean, if you might have an argument with a sibling at home, for example, as opposed to having an argument inside and work and so on. So you know that there will be a slightly different approach in both situations. But if you stand back and analyze it, the way you were presenting your points, there would be synergies, and you might have actually learned from what the argument you're having with your colleague or boss or whatever. You will probably notice that the way I did that, I'm also using that with my siblings and so on, in terms of trying to make my point or get my points across, and also the way I was listening to their points and earlier on. So that doesn't change. That's part of you. So separating the church and state doesn't apply in this case. Work-life balance. and then of course I'll loosely fold or whatever way, knock yourselves out, folks, on how if you want to walk around with a bloody tablet and a pen. I used to have a colleague many years ago, when laptops first came out. I mean, geez, they were rare, and he was bringing to nightclubs over in Stockholm. It was freaking gas. Donny was his name. I won't give you his second name, obviously, but yeah, he was. I'd say he must have been the only man in the country with a laptop this young. But he was constantly writing, taking notes and so on. But as I said, whatever works. I have, as I said, I have my. And I knew I wouldn't let myself down this time around again. And where am I? Jeez, come on, I want you stuck in stuff. That's my form of note taking. I don't these usuals. You can't see the lines on them, so notepads. I'll have them in my pocket. I'll draw diagrams or whatever it is. Whatever works for you. Of course, you can use your phones as well. And not to be restricted to written material. You could absolutely, you could be taking a photograph, and you could see something in an article, and it might jog your memory. Say, I must remember that now. That'll work at home in this situation, or I can use that in a particular situation at work or whatever. Bang, snapshot. And if you really want to, selfie with you in the magazine. Oh, Jesus Christ. Lord help me. So why keep it? It provides a record of professional development, which is interesting because when you begin to fill in your CV and populate out your experiences and so on and so forth, it does become a great source of reference to some of the instances. And more importantly, when you go for your interviews or reviews and so on and so forth, it does keep. It can be a very powerful source of reference as well when you want to go back and think of things or at least dig out the instances. Okay, and personalized learning by encouraging the person to own and value their development and achievement. Well, obviously, and as I said, I use mind maps. Whatever knocks yourself out, but it's highly personalized, So in the forms of the assessments that you're doing, particularly the final one, for example, you're using some examples to be able to demonstrate your ability to understand the process of reflective practice. Above and beyond that, it's extremely subjective, and then how can anyone critique it or mark it? It becomes next to near impossible. So it's only the process, I should say, we're interested in your understanding. Enables individuals to demonstrate coherence in the professional development and plan for the future as such. So yeah, you can see how people are learning from instances and experiences, and how they're piecing that together. More importantly, how effectively, as I said, I flip the coin and say that certain people were my mentors, and it's because of their ability to be able to handle situations or find solutions, and it was the way they did it that hugely impressed me. And that's kind of falls into this element here. How then can you emulate some of their behavior and make it yourself? But until you're able to understand these mechanics and processes, then you really are just flapping in the wind, and without direction. So it gives you a sense of purpose. So I have structure and form, and even though it might be loose, it doesn't necessarily, as I said, doesn't have to be specifically scheduled, but there is a structure and a form to this depth of learning.
So I'm going to go through Donald Schoen's view on reflective practice. So there's three main types of reflective practice, although he did actually expand on this later in his life. But the first one that you need to know about is called knowing in action. Now, knowing in action, what he means when he talks about knowing action is when you behave in a certain way based on your prior experiences. Now, the thing about this type of reflective practice is actually you don't know, it's unconscious. So it's all the knowledge you have gained from your experience with doing things and it's also referred to as tacit knowledge. So, for example, I don't know, in fact, Sharon talks about riding a bike. You know how to ride a bike. You get on the bike and you just know how to ride that bike. You don't have to sit and reflect upon it, you just do it. And that is because from past experience you have gained that knowledge and understanding of how to ride a bike. Now, with teachers, knowing in action would be when you behave a certain way within a classroom, but you don't actually think about it. So it's a behaviour that you have learned due to experience. And what is interesting, of course, is over time, the more experience you have, the more tacit knowledge you have. So the more you are behaving and reflecting in an unconscious manner because of the amount of experience you have developed over time. The second, or the next type of reflective practice is reflection in action. And this is when actually you do reflect while you're doing that practice, whatever that might be that you're doing at that specific time, but you are reflecting very, very quickly. So an example may be if you're teaching within a classroom, if you're a teacher, let's say one of the children misbehaves within that class that you are teaching, you may sit and think for a moment about what you're going to do about it. So it may be, I don't know, Johnny who's sitting next to James misbehaving, and you're deciding whether to, I don't know, move him to another seat, or to give him warnings, or to, I don't know, tell him off, for example. But that decision about what you're going to do is called reflection in action. It's when you reflect while you are doing that particular action. The next reflective practice is reflection on action. A reflection on action is all the reflective practice that you do after the event. So let's say, for example, you've just taught a lesson, you're a teacher, you've just taught a lesson. Reflection on action is after the lesson, you sit there and you reflect upon it and you decide what you could have done better, how you could go better, what you did well, why you did well, and what you can do about it. And it becomes, the reflection on action is the part of reflective practice that becomes a cyclical process. Because what you should do, of course, is after you have taught a lesson, if you're a teacher, you reflect back on that lesson and you decide what you could do better next time, and hopefully then what you'll do is that you'll implement that for your next lesson. And of course, reflective practice isn't just for teachers, although that's my expertise. It could be, let's say, for example, you're a student, you write an essay, you submit that essay and you get feedback from your lecturer, from your professor, and then you act upon that feedback. That would be an example of reflection on action as well. So those are the three main types of reflective practice and reflection that Donald Shern talks about in his early work.
Well, Jenny, thank you very much for being here. I will take the chance and ask you, as someone who worked quite for some time with the topic learning, reflective learning and reflective writing, on asking you the question, what is actually reflective learning? Maybe you could just put that into some bullet points or some short sentences.
Okay. Well, as I say, there is a definition I've used, and I think I'm going to mostly talk about that because otherwise I could go into all sorts of theoretical backgrounds which aren't going to be helpful. I think when we reflect, we largely think about learning we've already done and reorganise that and think about that. And as I've said to you, I've used the term cognitive housekeeping, a way of reordering what we know already. I might reach for further information, but generally speaking, it's reworking what I know already. And that conflicts with some of the theoretical positions used by other people. I think we reflect on what is uncertain or is ill-structured knowledge. It's not, it's like thinking. But I wouldn't, for example, say I want to reflect on the route to the bus stop. I'd plan it or think about it. But actually, if I'm disabled, it becomes a complex question, and therefore I might reflect on one route as opposed to another. And I think emotion is in reflection, but in lots of different ways. There are lots of relationships between learning and emotion. It's not a simple relationship at all. I mean, we reflect on what we learn, we feel emotion as a result of reflecting. We are inhibited in our reflection by emotional issues, all that sort of thing. I think we also, reflection is also a process. I think we sometimes decide to reflect on something and reflect through and then come out with some sort of response, or we might think, well, I'll reflect further on that. Or sometimes I don't want to lose the meaning of just sort of common sense reflection when we're sitting lazing around on a sunny day, and thoughts come to us and we reflect for a while and then either leave them or come to some sort of conclusion. So I think those elements come into reflection. I think when reflection is used in an academic context, there are other issues that come into it, like very often we'd need some short bit of description to say what the reflection is going to be about. So although we're not trying to get description from students, we're actually wanting them to reflect. We do need them to be good at writing that little bit of description. I also think that when they know that somebody else is going to look at what they've reflected on, that will change what they write, or how they reflect. But they will have been forced to do that reflecting in the first place. So you might not, as a tutor, get what really happened, but nevertheless, by asking for reflective writing from students, they will have had to reflect on the issue.
May I just jump in here? Why, in your opinion, reflective learning is of such an importance, actually?
I think reflecting on learning is really useful because we need to be assessing where we are in relation to knowledge. It's a way of thinking about what do I know, how do I know it, what is the quality of my knowing. And it builds towards the making of the independent judgments that I've said I think is so important. I think as professionals, people need to be able to make independent judgments. And part of learning to make those independent judgments is actually to build up a confidence in our ability to reflect on our knowledge and the quality of that knowledge.
Mm-hmm. You said two issues that I think they combine actually what you said. That was the cognitive housekeeping. You said about
cognitive housekeeping.
Yeah,
is a
I like very much.
of when I say I think we reflect on what we know already. Mm-hmm. I would also use that term, cognitive housekeeping. It's a reordering of what we know. And also we've talked, of course, about Harry Potter's pensieve, which is a very useful concept as well.
And I was, in this context, I was just wondering about this. There are two terms that I think come up for me. The one is the complexity and the issue of, I don't know if reducing is possible, but still the issue of complexity we deal with, also with knowledge and knowledge production. And the other one is the issue of uncertainty. You said that I think once also. How would you combine them with reflective learning or judgment?
Well, I would suggest that, not directly, but I would say that people's increasing ability to think, increasing sophistication along the progression towards sophisticated professional thinking. I think that is supported by reflection, and it supports reflection in depth. And I haven't mentioned that I think reflection has a depth dimension to it. Superficial reflection is very descriptive. It doesn't actually really it doesn't deal in depth with anything. Deep reflection is much more fundamental and it examines itself. It is reflexive as well. It looks at other viewpoints. It is much broader in review. It relates to prior experience. And I think that to develop independent judgment, one has to be really reasonably sophisticated in one's ability to think and to use that sort of deep reflection. Mm-hmm. Equally, I think to reflect at depth, you need to be fairly well advanced in your thinking skills.
Well, Jenny, and I say thank you very much for your time and for your words about reflective learning. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, dokie, folks.